next speaker is an exceptional leader. She has been practicing family law in Calgary for over 20 years. Oh boy. She is a fearless defender of the rights and freedoms of Albertans, and we are honored to have her with us today. I'm honored to have met her and to be able to call her my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking to us today about fighting to protect your rights, please welcome Katherine Kowalchuk, Lawyers for Truth. And good afternoon, everybody. So nice to be here. Thank you, Shannon, for that lovely introduction, and thank you to everybody in Facebook land for tuning in to watch. It's been a couple of months since I've been speaking with APP, and that's mostly due to the fact that I've moved to the lovely village of Standard, Alberta from Calgary, and have been busy doing other things. However, I still remain committed to the APP, and I also remain committed to an independent Alberta. Most of what I've been talking about since about November with the APP has been about why I believe the court system is not going to be the avenue that Albertans and Canadians can rely upon in order to expect justice in Canada with respect to the infringements that we've seen and have been experiencing for the past 2 years, 2+ years in particular. I am a volunteer member with Lawyers for Truth, and Lawyers for Truth is a small group of lawyers and other professionals who have been trying to call out the tyranny in respect to the various healthcare measures that have been imposed upon us across Canada and the province of Alberta, and the infringement of our rights. And our main focus has been primarily on masking, and we became very vocal when the province implemented mandatory masking. And we believed at that time that if people were going to be able or willing to adopt a mask, a slave diaper, whatever you want to call it, to put on their face, then we would be in big trouble. And I sit here today and I see that we are still in big trouble, notwithstanding the fact that we are allegedly out of, we're allowed to attend in public without a mask in most places, and that we, no longer have to get a vaccine to do certain things. However, as you have well known, or maybe you don't know, there are very many restrictions still alive and well in Canada and in the province of Alberta. We're still in stage 2 of this reopening plan, apparently. I don't know why we're not in stage 3 or why they haven't ended, but I suspect that the reason why we're still in stage 2 is because they have a plan to keep us in these stages and potentially in another lockdown. Or worse, who knows. We also, for people who decide not to disclose their private healthcare information, as you know, we are not allowed to travel within Canada or leave the country of Canada and by plane, train, or boat. And this is, of course, a problem. And Canada has, been dubbed, an open-air prison, biggest open-air prison in the world. Anyway, I'm not here to go on and on and on about that, but I do want to discuss with you why I still believe that the courts are not going to provide us the relief that we need to help end the tyranny in Canada and in Alberta that we are witnessing at this time. You all may be familiar with a court case that I initiated last July. I brought a charter challenge against the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta and the Provincial Court of Alberta with respect to their masking laws or rules or whatever you want to call it. I refuse to disclose my private healthcare information, although you can probably guess where I stand on that and what my status probably is. In any event, I refuse to disclose it, and although the lovely lawyers of the Court of Queen's Bench invited me to file a human rights complaint against the courts, I didn't think that was going to get me very far, and so I initiated a charter challenge against the courts, and I have James Kitchen representing me. And you may all be familiar with James Kitchen's work. He's a constitutional lawyer, and he's been fighting very tirelessly for our rights and freedoms. Now, I wanted to give you a brief update with respect to that. We have filed all of our evidence. We have some really great experts that have been gracious enough to provide their evidence for us. So we've filed all of our evidence, and we're now at the stage where we are waiting to set a hearing. We are not too sure yet if the courts are going to want to cross-examine any of the witnesses and the experts. However, we are still just now waiting for a time for this matter to be heard by way of originating application. There's a problem with this whole scenario, though, that I think that needs to be made clear for people. I'm suing the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta and the Provincial Court of Alberta, and the courts, all of the courts in Alberta have a masking policy and a vaccination policy. They all show up when they attend in their mask, and even despite the fact that Alberta has removed its mandatory masking requirements in almost every public place except for transit and in certain healthcare scenarios, the courts in their infinite wisdom, and I don't know what based on, have decided to keep their policies in place. And so I still cannot attend any courtroom or any courthouse in the province of Alberta without having to wear a mask. And I feel that there is an inherent bias in the courts because of the fact that they have these policies that they, in their infinite wisdom, have continued, like I said, notwithstanding the government relaxing this requirement. The other issue that is of great concern to me is that this case will be probably heard by another Court of Queen's Bench judge. So you can imagine, even if a Court of Appeal justice were to hear this case in Alberta, the fact that all three levels of court have adopted a policy of discrimination and infringing on people's rights and freedoms, the likelihood that I'm going to be successful in this case is very slim. So some might say, well, perhaps the best court to hear this would be the Supreme Court of Canada. Well, I don't think it's going to work out that way. And as we've heard at other APP events, and as Dr. Modry eloquently states, the likelihood that we are going to get a positive result in favor of human rights and freedoms on this issue, on healthcare, on the COVID issue, or on the trucker convoy issue is going to be very slim. And similarly, that kind of analysis extends to the courts assisting us with any attempt by Alberta to achieve a fair deal or anything like that within Confederation. In April of this year, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada was interviewed by a French publication called Le Devoir. And in the article, the Honorable Richard Wagner, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, said this about the trucker convoy. What we have seen recently on Wellington Street here is the beginning of anarchy, where some people have decided to take other citizens hostage, to take the law into their own hands, not to respect the mechanism. That I find worrying. Forced blows against the state, justice, and democratic institutions like the one delivered by protesters to the doors of the Prime Minister's office and the Privy Council, Parliament, the Supreme Court of Canada, and the Press Gallery parliamentary between January 28th and February 21st, the time that the truckers were in Ottawa, must be denounced with force, and this by all the figures of power in the country, believes Mr. Wagner. He therefore, the article went on to state, he therefore disapproves of the political actors who stuck to the Freedom Convoy, which is made up of people of good faith, but also of remotely guided people seeking to bypass the political system. It doesn't inspire good feelings in me, and I find that disturbing, he says. So So clearing up the confusion, he stated, the occupation of downtown Ottawa was fueled not only on diesel fuel, but also on a misunderstanding, and it must be said, a certain ignorance of the basics of the rule of law of Canada, laments Mr. Wagner. So I don't know about you, but it's clear that the Supreme Court Justice has a point of view about the trucker convoy. And it's clear that the courts who have policies that are discriminatory and violate human rights and freedoms have an opinion. And they proudly display it when they wear their masks wherever they go. So a group of lawyers in Canada, 13 of us to be specific, filed a complaint with the Canadian Judicial Council last week, or I believe it was last week, because it's our opinion that the Chief Justice's comments, that there's a reasonable apprehension of bias that can be drawn from the comments that he's made. The Supreme Court of Canada has yet to hear any case related to the infringement of our rights and freedoms since COVID began just over 2 years ago. And so it's very well is going to be that the Supreme Court will, in fact, at some point hear a case that has made its way through the court system in whatever province, through the Court of Appeal and to the Supreme Court. So when you have comments like this by the Chief Justice, who's said in other publications that he is proud of the fact that that the Supreme Court of Canada is the most progressive court in the world, and as Michael has already stated today, that notion of progressivism is not what it used to mean. It means something different. And is more woke in its interpretation and very, very leftist. There are huge problems that we're going to face potentially with finding justice at any level of courts in Canada, and specifically at the Supreme Court of Canada. And it is our recommendation to the Canadian Judicial Council that should any case make its way to the Supreme Court of Canada with respect to these issues, in particular, that the Chief Justice himself recuse himself. Now, the Chief Justice Judicial Council of Canada is also made up of Chief Justices across every province in the country. So you can imagine that for whatever jurisdiction, whatever province that is continuing with these mandates themselves or have seen fit to make decisions that are completely not in support of people's human rights and freedoms, we can reasonably conclude that that justice is likely not to occur in Canada anytime soon. And that is why I'm in favor of an alternative solution rather than doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result that Michael has clearly and eloquently spoken about, and why attempts at reforming Alberta's position within Confederation remains to be challenging. At this point, we must come to a different solution. And for right now, the only peaceful solution that I can see actually working is to hold the referendum on independence to have the leverage necessary to negotiate the terms of our separation. If that doesn't work, I'm not too sure what the next steps will be. However, nothing changes if nothing changes. And voting for the same old is only going to get us the same old results. So you can see the problems that we have in the Canadian courts. I can tell you firsthand that the decisions in Canada have all been in favor of the government, and at a private level have favorably found in favor of government policies in support of the arguments that forced vaccination should occur with children, for instance, and that it is okay to fire an employee, for instance, for refusing to disclose private healthcare information or refusing to take a medical intervention that they don't agree with. There's one case in Ontario that did shed some light on this issue, and a brave judge there in a family law case was brave enough and courageous enough to discuss this issue, and even made some comments like, what is misinformation anyway, and really took to task the other decisions that we were seeing in different levels of court across Canada. But like I said, at this point, the likelihood that we're going to get any sort of positive result for this matter in Canada is going to be slim. As I mentioned, all the Chief Justices form part of the Canadian Judicial Council, and they are going to be deciding whether or not and what sort of penalty or sanction or whatnot that they might impose against the Chief Justice of Canada. And I'm not confident that they will actually do anything. The best possible case scenario will be that he'll recuse himself from hearing any of these matters. And again, the likelihood of that is probably slim to none. But I don't want to end on a bad note, even though I feel like our attempts will be our arguments and whatnot, and the decisions will not fall in our favor. Now is the time for Albertans, especially, that we have to rise up, and we have to get involved, and we have to wake up and get involved in the process so that we can protect the future for our children. And it really is, I was guilty of it too for most of my life as well, sitting by the sidelines thinking that people were acting in our best interest, but it's very clear that that's not the case. It's very clear that our political parties to date, and many political parties and corporations that run our country and influence our policy are corrupt. And it's a bold statement to state that. I've been saying that for a number of years now, but it's true. And the more we look into it, the more we're finding that the depths of the corruption are something that go right to the core. And so when you have a situation like that, like I said, the only option I see us having is to vote for a party that believes in independence, is committed to holding a referendum, and is committed to bringing accountability back to Albertans and Canada, transparency, and not just paying lip service to those principles, but actually acting them out. Thank you.